stuff where you need to sit behind your designer and get stuff done. We said nothing can simulate that.
Yeah.
Trust me, we've begun experimenting with screen share, doing that, and everything's working absolutely okay. We're no longer missing
Yeah.
the physical
Yeah.
skill
Yeah.
being in office kind of.
So I think we should kick off, Sangram.
Super. I think it's 7:05 and
Sure.
it's
Yep.
the right time. So a big hello everyone and welcome to yet another session of Guts, Glory and Story. This time we were able to make you privy to all our little chit chat that we usually do when you guys are waiting outside. So yeah, welcome to the show. We have Rohan with us today, and he's also a common friend who got introduced to us through Kaval. And Kaval introduced us to the speaker last time, who was the owner of ID Foods, and what a session it was with PC Mustafa. And here we are to hear one more great story. For a few of them who might not have known us after 2 full seasons, I'm Sangram Surve. I'm an advertising guy, a marketing strategist, a filmmaker. And with me is my co-host Alok Sinha, who's an author, who's a serial entrepreneur, a serial CEO, and also an investor. Alok's book has just come out in the market, Achieving Successful Business Outcomes. As a matter of fact, during the last lockdown, and Alok is doing some wonderful stuff with his digital platform, Mr. Kapaza. But more on that later. I think we're all waiting to hear yet another inspiring story of God's glory and story. And as a format, we told you last time, as a format is very simple. This time, it's not about decoding economies. It's not about any airy fairy stuff. It's just about good, heartfelt stories, stories of guts and glory. And that's exactly what we're going to hear today. But to formally introduce Rohan, I'm going to call on my dear partner, Alok. Alok, over to you.
Thank you, Sangram. Welcome, Rohan, to Guts, Glory and Story. And you're a fearless leader, and you have no trepidation whatsoever walking on very non-conventional roads. In fact, when I was speaking to you, it seemed that you had taken many significant moves, or you made many significant moves, which were fraught with risk. At least, to me, sitting outside, it seems so. And that's why, I think your story is a true culmination of guts and glory. So here's my first question to you, Rohan. Having lived in the US for nearly 30 initial years, what made you come back to India and make it big here? So for most of us here in India, it is the other way around, right? Every child yearns to be in your land, the land of plenty, the US. But you chose to do the reverse and became extremely successful. Why and how?
Sure. So first off, thanks Sangram and Alok for having me. Super excited and a pleasure to be here. And then I'll jump right into this first question of yours, Alok. I should have had my father next to me answering this question because he thought I was absolutely insane for doing what you just rightfully said. And as you can imagine, it was quite a conversation with the family when I decided to move. And here's my father and my grandfather who actually came to the United States back in the 70s. And here's a conversation you're having with them that we left everything to give you guys this wonderful opportunity to live, and now you're gonna just reverse that. And so you can imagine there was a one heck of a conversation that took place. But I think what was very interesting, and there's a lot of nuances to this answer, so I'll try to keep it as concise as possible. But between us, I mean, I never had any intent of being in India. It was not that it was never that I had pursued a career or looked for anything. I came from a finance background, and honestly, it was this. I think every entrepreneur has a eureka moment. But what we did do is as growing up, as many of you have family members that would come from abroad, NRIs, which we were one of them. You would visit during the December, Jan, holiday season or wedding season when it was peak. Every few years we'd visit. Now I get annoyed when they visit and take up our traffic, but it was interesting because we would visit and of course the exposure was there and all that. But I never thought that I would actually live and work in India. But I took this course in business school. And I always wanted to be an entrepreneur. I just never knew which direction I wanted to go. And I was always wanted to be an entrepreneur. My passion has always been food, food and beverage, all types of beverages. And it's just something that I've always sort of enjoyed. I'm not the best. I'm still sort of an amateur, but I do love getting behind the, behind in the kitchen. I still love going crazy. And it's always a passion I had. And when I took this course, when I was in business school, and I went to India, I taken a course called Marketing to the Indian Consumer, and I spent a week there in Mumbai, and came across some very, very dynamic personalities. One of them being Damodar Mal, who's now the CEO of Reliance Retail. Another one being Shripad Nadkarni, who's actually not just a good friend now, but an angel investor and advisor, through whom I met Kaval eventually. And just heard these guys guest lecture and was just so blown away. This was back in 2011, December, so almost 9 years ago. I was just blown away by the prospects that were coming, and Shripad especially spoke about, the advent of consumer brands in India in the next decade, sort of 15, 20 years to come. And I remember sitting there in class and, I'm saying that you'll see sort of brands get born in the next 20, 25 years that will stand the test of time. We're at that cusp of that. And mind you, this was also a time when no one was really excited about India, because the scandals were going on and all that. But I think I think they say that you have that ghanti baj gayi moment, right? That eureka moment, and that's when I had that moment for myself. And I came back to the United States. I came back to Philadelphia to B school. I was planning on going back into finance. I had no intent of this, but just had that voice at the back of my ear that this is your calling. Like, you have to do this. And without going into too much detail, I mean, we can talk about it more. But as you can imagine, pretty much got slammed by every single family member, friend. I had uncles and aunties telling me, you're an ABCD. For some of you who don't know what that means, the American-born confused AC.
Yeah.
And my father's generation, his friends saying that, we are pretty successful entrepreneurs in the United States, and we failed in India. What makes you think you can succeed? And I think it was just one of those things. I said, look, I have to do this for myself, because I don't want to be sitting here 20 years from now and saying, I had that opportunity, and read about it and say, I have to do this for myself. I'm not doing this for anybody. I'm doing this for myself, right? And that's one thing I always say about entrepreneurs. You may try to convince yourself you're doing it for others. Entrepreneurship is one of the most selfish acts that one does. And I think once you sort of get around that, you realize what it means. But that was that. And then I reached out to Shripad, stayed in touch. And then in January 2013, I took a one-way ticket. So 8 years minus the 1 year I've been in the United States during lockdown. So that's been the story, Alok.
What a story. What a story. Yeah. Now everyone must be very proud of you and what you did. I mean, they must be now agreeing, okay, well, you were right.
Yeah. Now I get called to be an advisor. So that's always interesting.
But I think what is very familiar to me is the two names that you took, because I know both those people. I know Shripad again through common friends, because Shripad again was head of branding at a couple of organizations where I have had my mentors. And Damodar is a close friend. So I know how passionate Damodar is about India, about the big India opportunity. So I'm not surprised if these two people have managed to brainwash you and get you back to India. Well, the happy part about having you in India is that I'm a big fan of Epigamia. So when I bumped into your name being a part of Guts Glory Story, and I said, okay, he's the man behind the yummy yogurt that we have. I said, great. And that's what brings me to the next question is we are in a land where doodh dahi, with the land of doodh dahi, right? I mean, and in such a country, you go back and you call your brand of yogurt Epigamia, or your brand as Epigamia, which has Greek roots, right? So that's a point of curiosity. What's the story behind Epigamia, the name, the Greek origins? Could you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah. I'll start off with a funny sort of story, but what you just said. I remember I had again coming back to sort of my family and two of my father's friends who are both based in Mumbai, very successful sort of businesses they've run, and one of them, his exact words were, "Beta, India ke dahi bechega." And I remember that conversation, and I said, yeah, essentially that's what I'm going to do. I mean, that if it comes down to it. And then another friend of my father's, a little more intellectual, so you want to sell ice to Eskimos? And I said, yeah, I guess that's a nice way to summarize it. So these guys have been great because they've been devil's advocates, and I think they pushed me, and like I told Alok, I like to perform. I somehow tend to perform under pressure. I get complacent when pressure is not there. So that seemed to work. But to come to answer your question, Alok, and Sangram, the thought process for us. Let me start with the sort of brand thesis, and then I'll tell you about where the name came from. The brand thesis was really a culmination of the company, the founders, myself, my co-founders, and what we were setting out to do. And what we're setting out to do is disrupt this very traditional dairy product industry, right, which has existed, for 300, 400 years, and has been the same, has not had any disruption. Like we rightfully said, there's dahi and that's about it. And whereas there's been global disruptions around the world, but the disruptions around the world have taken place more so from a brand perspective than a product perspective. And what I mean by that is, yes, we sell Greek yogurt and we sell Greek yogurt smoothies. Those are two of our core sort of staple products, but they're not actually new in terms of the palate in India. Greek yogurt is nothing other than a lower sugar form of Srikhand, the good old Gujarati Srikhand. You remove the sugar and you maybe remove the nuts, and you've got Greek yogurt. And then if you take that thick Punjabi lassi and you flavor it with mango, and instead of mango, strawberry, you've got a Greek yogurt smoothie. Yeah. Fortunately or unfortunately, there has to be a differentiation. And you're being a brand guy, Sangram, you understand that, at least from a market perspective, what is different from lassi, what is different from dahi, what is different from curd. And not so much so Greek, but I think globally. And by the way, I don't know if there's another story around this, but the Americans actually branded this product Greek yogurt. In Greece, they look at you and say, "What are you talking about? What is Greek yogurt?" So leave it to the Americans to brand it something. Just the way they branded Xerox and whatnot. But I think Greek yogurt just became a branded phenomenon, not really a product. It's more about the universal language around what that thick strained yogurt is.
Yeah.
So I think it was easy for us to sort of capitalize on that because there was some sort of health nuts and influencers within the country that were already aware of this concept of Greek yogurt. We discussed a lot. We said, should we call it strained yogurt? Should we call it chakka? Should we call it other names? Should we call it lower sugar Srikhand? And I guess the narrative didn't come alive, right? Because the attempt was to contemporize this traditional industry. And that's where the narrative came. Now that once we figured out that, okay, this is the route we wanted to take, we really wanted a name that stood for what we believed in and what our mission was, right? Which was to sort of disrupt this category. And also, and I say this before the Prime Minister's mission came out, that we actually had Make and Made in India on our packaging even when we launched. The idea was that, and this came as a discovery, that we had such amazing, and we have such amazing ingredients at the root. You go into some of the strawberries that we have. I mean, we all know the mango story, but even our strawberries are some of the best strawberries you can get in the world. In Panchgani, outside of Mahabaleshwar. Unfortunately, we don't actually get to experience some of the best because the supply chains are weak, and consumers demand really low price. So there's this. It gets lost in the supply chain, and then corners are cut. Right, you end up using pesticides and chemicals and all. We all know the narrative. I won't go into that discussion, but if you actually look at the root, where some of the produce comes from, even some of the milk we have. I mean, I know there's a lot of narratives around milk getting adulterated and getting poor quality milk, but that actually happens in the supply chain, not at the source. The source is extremely, extremely strong, and when we dive deep, it's some of the best quality you can get in the globe. And the idea for us was to create a brand, a premium brand, and bring a product that would not just stand up on the shelves of India, but stand on any shelf around the world and say this is supreme quality. It just happens to be made in India, and because of, and move the needle in terms of what Make in India means. And therefore we were inspired by this sort of East meets West amalgamation, and which is what basically I'm a product of as well as an individual. And if you go back to sort of, and I'm also a history nerd, so now I gave you the exciting part of the story, and I'll give you like a little bit boring, so I'm just going to request your audience to stay with me. I'm going to bore you for a minute. So I'm going to make you go back to our history books. So you go back to sort of 500 BC, between 400 and 500 BC, and we had Alexander the Great and the great, Greek Empire, Macedonian Greek Empire. The armies of Alexander the Great had crossed Persia, modern day Afghanistan, Iran, and reached India. And in our Indian history books, we call him Sikandar, if some of you may know. And at the time, we were under the Mauryan dynasty, so Chandragupta Maurya. So we're the Mauryan Indians, and you're the Macedonian Greeks. And there was actually a war that took place, at that border of where modern day Afghanistan is today. And that war was the first ever documented war between Eastern and Western civilization. And that war ended in a peace treaty. Now, in the Western history books, which I actually remember reading when I was younger here in the United States, it says that Alexander the Great's armies got tired and went back. Of course, in our history books, it says we won the war. So who knows what happened? We have to go back in time. But the war ended in a peace treaty, which was the first ever documented peace treaty between Eastern and Western civilization. And that peace treaty was predicated on an ancient Greek term called Epigamia. And what that word meant was a marriage of civilizations. Because there was no word for peace. Believe it or not, back then when war was a sort of a way of life, there was no real word for peace. So they actually predicated on this Greek term, which meant marrying outside your culture, intermarriage. It was like this edict that was given, and it was called Epigamia. And we thought it was very fitting to what we're doing today, given that we are blending Eastern and Western civilization. We're taking the best of what India has to offer and giving it to the globe. And that's where the name Epigamia comes from.
Wow.
Is this story documented somewhere, as in anywhere on your packaging? And
we do have it in different areas. It's hard to get the entire narrative onto the pack, but we do mention it, absolutely, and we do talk about it.
Because it's such an interesting narrative, because I think the marriage of East and West, and I'm sure you have it on your website somewhere with the entire story.
We do.
Yeah, that's not surprising. Super.
You just stumped my next question, because I was going to ask you, tell us a little bit more about Epigamia's journey from its initial struggles. But with Epigamia meaning peace itself, I think the struggle is a bad word. So you just stumped me. But tell us a little bit more about your journey, from the point when you started. And the struggle was largely, a lot of the struggle was inside the head, within the family. Then you went out, to the first fundings and where it is now. Right.
Yeah.
And where did you meet my friend Kamal? I'd like to know that also. I mean, how?
Yeah. So that's actually a fun story as well. Yeah. So I learned. So I told you guys about the class I took. One piece I didn't sort of mention is, while I was that sort of NRI visiting every few years, a friend of mine, along with some other business partners, had launched an ice cream parlor. And I had agreed to come on as an angel investor. I thought, it was peanuts. Just put some 1 or 2 lakhs into this way back in 2009, 2010. And that was the first avatar of what our business was, which was it was a brand called Hokey-Pokey ice cream. Some of you may have heard of it. Actually, we had a location in Ville Parle, Sangram, so I don't know if that rings a bell.
Sounds familiar.
Yeah. And that's where I sort of when I said this sort of Ghanti Baj Gayi and I had that eureka moment in class, the initial thought was how to build that business and scale it. The idea was that these brands would get born that would stand the test of time. And then I reached out to Shripad, as I mentioned, and then he not only agreed to help, but he said, I'll invest. But the number one thing is you need to move here and do this full time. You can't be taking a nice fancy banking job in the city of New York and then doing this part time. So that's when I moved in 2013. And I think the first thing was just to sort of really understand the landscape. And talking about being an outsider, I have no background in the industry. I'm a finance guy who likes to think he's a marketeer, which is a pretty nasty combination. It ends up being talk about peace and conflict. And so we set out to sort of build this business. And the one thing we had was two ice cream parlors where I started. Of course, and there's an evolution that came around where we realized the real opportunity was in this sort of movement towards healthier eating, and that's where Epigamia was born. I gave you guys the story there as well, how that came about. But a lot of the initial sort of and you're right, I think struggle is the wrong word. A lot of the initial journey was actually me spending time. I think the first thing I came to terms with was I just need to really understand the consumer, because at the end of the day, that's where we win. I still believe that. I think of course everyone will tell you there's metrics and there's this and there's that, and there's operations and there's manufacturing. Yeah, that's great. I mean, you're talking to a guy who has zero experience in any of that, and we figured it out. What I don't think one can figure out is really where the consumer's heart is and where the consumer's mindset is. And I spent my first sort of 6 to 8 months just actually sitting in those ice cream parlors serving ice cream and having conversations. And you know, I like to very proudly say I creeped out a lot of consumers because they're like, what is this Firang accent guy? You know, like they're chewing our brain. Why does he want to know, you know, what time we wake up in the morning and what do we do all day and what do we eat for lunch and dinner? Just give me my ice cream and get out of my face. but that's what I did. I spent a lot of time but you know, that being said, you know, just amazing conversations with customers. One of my, you know, customers ended up becoming an investor. You know, and that's where the journey really started. And that's where we realized that, you know, in the ice cream business, that this was a very nighttime, evening post-dinner product. And you know, and without going into too much detail, we realized that it wasn't scalable because it was you were paying rent for the entire day, but your action was only happening for those 1 or 2 hours at night. And on top of that, it was extremely seasonal, right? Because there was seasonal shifts within monsoon season, et cetera. But they also realized that there was a lot of conversation around healthier eating, and there were a lot of people that were talking about the cheat day, and you know, we don't eat ice cream every day, or we don't eat ice cream the way we used to, but we still like ice cream. But you know, we're just so. And let me pause because I'm not saying that they knew what they were doing. Even I don't know what I'm doing in terms of that. I think healthy is still a very overplayed word. It's very personalized. But there was that conversation started to happen, you know, back in 2013, early 2013. I said every conversation for food was around health. And that became very interesting because, you know, here's a narrative and here's a storyline and here's what people are actually thinking. So what we realized is that there was this notion of permissibility that everyone thought they were doing something right. You know, I always call it I go to McDonald's, I get a burger and I get a Diet Coke because that saves me, you know, saves me from my guilt, because I had a Diet Coke which made me healthier than what ended up happening. And that's what became very interesting in the early journey, Alok, to answer your question, because this is the route that we took, just a religious focus on the consumer, you know, and where things were headed and how things were sort of playing out. And that's where we sort of, you know, built our business around. And then during that journey, when we so my co-founder is a chef, he was involved in the ice cream parlors and he built sort of the product. We came up with the brand story. And I think, and the initial idea behind Epigamia was actually to complement the ice cream business of Hokey-Pokey. It's just that everything we learned about the consumer, we put behind this. The first one was a passion hobby, the ice cream business. This was like a real, well thought through, in the weeds of the consumer thinking business that we launched. And you know, the second baby just took off on a different level. And to answer your question about Kaval, so you know, so I had this first sort of angel round, which was what I like to call the FFF, the friends, family, and fools that decided to invest in the company, and obviously a bulk of it driven by family and fools, and then had sort of Shripad come on board, also one of my professors from my undergrad days. Both of them are on my board today as well. And then Shripad actually introduced me to Kaval. I was actually down in Bangalore visiting. So two dear friends. One is Shripad, the other is, which you guys will most likely know, I'm sure you do, Alok, is my friend Neeraj from Paperboat, who's also, you know, sort of very close to your friend, who's 2 years my senior from business school. And they both, you know, spoke very highly of Kaval. Kaval was at Helion back then. So I remember actually I was introduced to him and went and met him. And I think with Kaval, it's one of those things. I hope he feels the same way. It's just one of those love at first sight. You literally fall in love within 5 minutes, right? and I remember him being at Helion, and I in my mind I thought I was pitching to Helion, but I wasn't, because he already decided to leave. And he actually talked to me separately. He said, "Look, I'm sort of moving on, and you know, I'm making a couple of angel investments, and I'm thinking maybe in the future I may launch, you know, a fund." Now that thought became like not just a thought; it became the most ultimate fund that to ever exist in the consumer space in India, and the Midas touch. But so we ended up becoming a dear advisor, a dear friend, and also an angel investor back then. So we tell everyone we're from Fireside Ventures Fund Zero, because it was Fireside Trust at that time. And that's how that relationship started.
Personal money. He did say at some
yes,
point.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
He trusted you a lot. I mean, I have heard that discussion and both Susie, his wife, and he I think
yes, and they became like I think I've crashed their home many times, just invited myself over, and wonderful folks, wonderful folks. Spent a lot of time with them.
And that's not the first time, by the way, we've heard of people uttering the word love at first sight when it comes to Kamal.
I'm sure. Not surprised.
Yeah. So was that the inflection point? I mean, post that the things really take off after the fireside after the, I wouldn't even say the pre-fireside investment.
Yeah, so I think that was sort of the angel side. I think the first 2 years were the journey was obviously extremely tough, and there was a lot of ups and downs. There were many times you're sitting. So we had this little kitchen in Kurla. You're from Bombay, so on LBS Marg, and not BKC, proper Kurla.
Yeah.
Behind a CNG pump where we used to operate, and we literally had a kitchen downstairs, and we had made a mezzanine, which I don't even think was legal, above, where to get to the office you had to duck your head, so you literally had to squat and then move, and then you could come and sit. So anyone above 5'11", 5'11", 6 feet just would not be able to get up there. And it was an interesting sort of 2 years, because you're really trying to figure out what this means. And so you at that point, the confidence I had was that I felt that I was able to understand the dynamism that's happening in the consumer journey in India. I think that piece, that puzzle I was able to solve. Then everything else sort of came around. So the first 2-3 years were an insane sort of challenge. And then I think the real cusp came when Epigamia took off, which was in 2015. We launched it, and then also the third piece of the puzzle, which was, so there was Chef, myself, and then there was also and then Rahul, who's my other co-founder. He joined. So Rahul, actually, interesting story. He was also running a food startup in organic milk. And there was a bunch of us in Mumbai, a bunch of brands, which I'm sure, or Sangram, you're very familiar. You'll be familiar with a lot of them. So Chef's Basket, Raw Pressery, Anuj from Raw. So a bunch of us, used to sort of all the strugglers in the beginning, trying to, all through the same problems, the same issues. We actually used to hang out. We had a group on WhatsApp called Foodpreneurs. We would share war stories, help each other out. The guys in Bangalore were different. This was the Mumbai gang, I guess, in that sense. And Rahul was one of them, and ended up becoming really close to him. Really, again, sort of one of those love at first sight things. And we had a lot of similar issues with the dairy supply chain, because we were in dairy. He was doing fresh milk, we were doing dairy products, and ended up sort of becoming really close. And one day, just we met up over dinner and drinks, and we were chatting, and he said, look, I'm thinking about getting into Greek yogurt. And I said, pause right there. And I showed him what we were going to do. We were also going to, in fact, I showed him the packaging, and I even told him the story. And I said that, so let's make sure. So I think that night, both of us sort of went home and saying this, that. So literally the next day I called him and I said, are you thinking what I'm thinking? He's absolutely. He said, it's time we just join hands. I mean, what's the point of, fighting the fight independently? Let's just do this together. So he came on as a founding, co-founder. And I think that really changed the journey, because at that point, so Chef took care of production and sort of R&D. I took care of pretty much everything else. And then once Rahul joined on board, I think we were able to sort of just, focus on what our fortes were. And then a year later, we ended up raising our Series A. And I think that 2015 to 2016 is where the journey took off. So it took 2-3 years to get there. And those 2-3 years were not pretty at all in any way. But it was a fun time.
So I think there are two common things which I would like to really tie all the names that you mentioned over here. One is that I think all of you guys and your products are part of the Nature's Basket shopping cart when I go to Nature's Basket. So there is a raw pressery, there is an Epigamia, and all these products are there. The other thing I think which is common to Kamal's story as well, is that most of you guys are digital first. Now, was that a decision prompted by Kaval, or did you always know that you're part of this new brand of entrepreneurs who's actually going to skip that entire value chain of going to distributors, retailers, and go digital first? Was it influenced by Kaval, or?
So actually, we fall in the earlier bucket. So we were actually not digital first. So we were digital third, digital fourth. Now, digital, from a brand perspective, we were purely digital or sampling. There was nothing else that communication, narrative, etc. but we were actually digital third, digital fourth. And I won't pick Kaval's brain or speak for him, but I would like to think some of the learnings he had with us and with Paperboard and PC Mustafa led him to his thesis of digital first. Because when he came up with it, frankly, even we thought he was a little crazy. And but of course, I mean, he's always 5 years ahead of the curve. I mean, there's no doubt about it. He picked us when no one else would even look at us. He picked the new cohort, which became the digitally first brands. In food, it's a little tougher, Sangram. I think personal care has a different story. Not that it can't be done; it's been done, and we've seen some successful stories. But I think even now, any brand launching, even if it's food, I think the friction is just a lot less, right? And your consumer connect is so direct. So while and I wish we just fell a few years early, when we launched, before you could even think about going digital first. Now we had another nuance because we have a cold chain to work on. We have our short shelf life, and that's another animal altogether. But I think what ends up happening is, like I said, religious focus on consumer, which you'll see a thread amongst all these brands you just took the names of, right? It's without doubt that's where we win. That's where, because for us it's consumer or die, and nothing else really matters. But I think what's interesting with digital first now, and by the way, we do have a digital channel now, and it's become pretty successful. But what's exciting is that you've got this consumer connect in terms of the research you've done and the thinking and the brand and the storyline. But now you can actually transact directly with them, and that allows for just a whole different strategic shift. And this COVID time actually led us to launch our own direct-to-consumer channel, which frankly didn't exist before lockdown. Our e-com business was like 3 or 4% of our revenues before lockdown. Today, our digital channel, which is our e-com and our direct-to-consumer, is 32% of our business.
Wow!
And that's just 1 year later, which is just insanity, right? And now, mind you, you're talking about a modern avatar, contemporary avatar of Dahi having a direct-to-consumer channel. And then on top of that, a cold chain business, which is sort of unheard of to have that sort of thing. But for us, it continues to be a rapidly exciting growing channel. But more importantly, it's just allowing us to roll out products and get feedback very fast. It's allowing us to fail fast. We don't need detailed research reports to see what we want to do. We can immediately sell it to direct consumers. And I'm a fan of surveys and market research, but until a consumer takes out those rupees and pays you for it, he or she's not going to give you real feedback. And that's what allows us to get real feedback. So we've actually, one of the things we've done in the last 6 months is we've rolled out 14 new SKUs, all thanks to this digital channel. Because now we're able to get immediate feedback. We're able to, literally get feedback that this is good or this is terrible, and then decide how we want to iterate, if we want to launch, how we want to launch, which channels we want to roll it out in. There's so much, really rich data that we have now, which frankly, if you asked me just 2 years ago, I would have thought unheard of. But I think this is the way forward. I mean, it's just for a startup today, the friction is so much lower. Of course, you have to have a killer business plan and a killer product and a killer brand narrative, but the friction is so much lower to get started, at least. Then it's about how you scale.
Actually, the wonderful
and Kaval figured that out. Kaval figured out 5 years ago.
Correct. No, I think what we discovered in season 1 of Guts, Glory and Story, and I think what the thread is continuing over here, is the gift that COVID actually gave entrepreneurs, and that's the gift of leapfrogging change that has been eluding us for quite a long time. And one of the biggest changes has been digital.
Yes, absolutely. And whereas I still come from a mindset where scale still means omnichannel, to your point, where it's that distributors, in fact, we're going through that journey right now as we speak. But having the direct access to a consumer, at least part of it, you can make a lot of assumptions and extrapolate what that will mean as a much larger business when you do go through them, and because that's just more the supply chain. I think that the days of putting an ad on TV and just sitting back and smoking a cigarette and thinking sales will happen, those are way gone. The 80s and 90s are way behind us.
But I think you've taken one route which a lot of conventional brands do, and which is roping in celebrities. And we hear that you're working with Deepika Padukone for Epigamia. Yes. Tell us a bit more about that.
So this one. So I've seen. So when I had sent you the mail, you sent that ad back to me. Rohan, believe me, the number of times Deepika says Rohan is far more than I've ever seen her say Ranveer in any. What did you do? I mean, she just kept going. Rohan and I did this. Rohan said this. I said this, and Rohan and I did this. So How did you manage that? And that's the more glamorous part of the question.
What?
Yeah.
Are you asking how did you manage Deepika
The
saying
number of
opening night?
Rohans that she said. More than Ranveer. Both ours, but
I know that, yeah. No, I think I'll answer the question, but I think first it's not about me managing it. I think the first thing to sort of realize, and I'm not sort of trying to be patronizing here because she is a partner, but it Deepika, the vision Deepika has, I personally, I'm not that I know anyone else in that industry or sector, is that of an entrepreneur. I have yet to see someone with that kind of thinking and foresight in from that sort of industry. Just so, again, very similar to Kaval, thinking of the future, where things are going to go, 5-7 years from now. And to answer your question, I actually met her. I think there was some common threads that we had on the business front. We ended up meeting and chatting about how we could potentially work together. And her vision was very clear. And listen, we till date we can't afford spending money the way a Unilever can or one of the big guys can, right? Till date we can't, by the way. But her vision was very different. She said, "Look, I'm ready to put skin in the game. I'm happy to be an investor here. Not just but if you see value in that." And I said, "Of course we see value in that." And for us, it wasn't just about getting a Bollywood or a personality like hers. It was actually having someone with an insane vision, to say, "Look, I'm ready to put skin in the game and make this happen as an investor, as an advisor, and also think of the future. Like where does this company go, and where can I play a role in turbocharging the growth to take it to the next level." And that's what what is just very unique and sort of rare, but you're seeing more and more of it happen. It's happened a lot here in the United States. You'll see Rihanna has done it, Madonna has done it, George Clooney with this tequila brand, and you'll see that happening a lot here. And I think I'm really excited that this becomes sort of a case study or a model for the way even Bollywood interacts with startups going forward, which is let's put let's put money where our mouth is, and actually make this happen. Not just put up an ad or something like that.
Yeah.
And I think that's what really excited me is to see someone with this kind of vision, right? She has an investment office that invests in startups. They have a portfolio of companies where she's readily involved in advising. And when I tell you advising, I mean she is rigorous. When it comes to even things like packaging, I'll see emails just go back and forth, rejecting this, rejecting that, and it's all coming from a place like this. She wants this to succeed. It's not just she's getting paid for an ad. And that's what I think was super exciting when I first heard her speak. And not only that, just for us, having a visionary like that, as an investor, advisor, and a partner. And then secondly, also really standing for the brand, right? I kept telling you the vision for us is, made in India and export to the world. And that's what Deepika also is. She's this sort of at the core, a traditional person, but a contemporarized version of that. So she's this made in India for the world, sort of individual. And that's what's really exciting about the partnership with her. I mean, she's just been a pleasure to work with. And like, I don't know if any of you saw the thing that we did. She actually came to the lab. She came to the kitchen. She got her hands dirty. The questions she asked, I almost looked at her. I said, "What are you, a VC?" Like, she's asking me questions like, but I don't understand. If we scale production, how do we convert it from this to this? And I said, I didn't come prepared with answers for this, So, but yeah, I mean, she's been just a gem to work with. And it's rare. It's rare having that kind of being of that kind of personality and having that kind of vision. I mean, we're just blessed to have her as a partner.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
So one question, which stems from here is you don't have any social media presence, right? You have just zero social media presence. So,
Right.
Even if you are direct to custom, D2C, direct to customer, talking about Deepika, who's very social media savvy, your own brand, which has a very big social media presence. And I call it, the attention versus success conundrum, right? So many a times we go to social media, post and look for the number of likes. That's not
Yeah.
success. That's only attention,
Yeah.
right? So you're not looking at attention. But success comes from within. No one needs to give a like. Where are you? I mean, why don't you need a social media presence? So, and many a times, you know, people employ secretaries to run that. Why no social media?
So I'll and I will caveat that saying that I am on LinkedIn and Facebook, but yes, I don't tend to sort of post and things of that nature. And this is a question that I get hammered by, you know, not just friends but my team. They get very irritated that that their CEO is not sharing stories and and whatnot. No, I think so. Let me answer this question a little differently. You know, one of our sort of brand values is authenticity. You know, and that's sort of core to who we are, what we believe in, right? And that's sort of ingrained in the culture of the company, externally and internally. And you know, for me, I think I think just personally, you know, between having to manage a startup, you know, which itself is insane, and then there's this journey of entrepreneur to CEO. I still have no idea what CEO means. It's the title that they've given me. I'm still learning on the fly. Hopefully, I'll figure it out one day. You know, I still, but at the core, I'm very much an entrepreneur. And now it's an entrepreneur who's trying to still, you know, sort of, you know, through guts, build this business. And then at the same time, have, you know, this leadership team. Now we've got amazing people on board, and the team consists of people that are far brighter and talented and energetic and sort of much smarter than I am. And the idea is to learn from them, you know, not just, and it's, you know, behooves me to tell them what to do, but I have to sort of manage this conundrum. I just don't know where the time comes to you know, send a tweet or be on Instagram. I look forward to the day when I can actually do that. Because for me, if I'm going to do that, it has to be coming from me. It has to be authentic. It's who we are. It's how we operate. You know, and to outsource that, I think is just not authentic at all. It's sort of you know, it's not the business we're in, or the person that I am. So yeah, I mean, I think you know, I do put some things out on LinkedIn every now and then, just when sort of Tanvi, who's our head of PR, just literally yells at me. And it's more so from the sense of you know, just exciting the team to put stuff out there. And of course, I'll have sometimes our ad folks, they just put it out there because the video will get likes, and you know, we'll be able to share it and we'll spread the word. So I do that every now and then, just to sort of, I'll be very open and candid. There's a business agenda around it. I won't do it otherwise on LinkedIn, you know, to be very candid and honest about it. But yeah, to your point, I think I just don't find the time, and I wish I could find the time. I'd love to sort of partake and share my views. I'm a very opinionated person. I'd love to share my opinions. But you know, I think when the day ends, you know, and it is already very minimal sleep that's happening as it is.
Yeah.
So that's sort of where it comes from. You know, if that answers the question.
No, completely understand. I think social media is all about genuine social media, and which is not which is based on substance. All comes from authenticity. And unless
Exactly.
you have authentic
Yeah.
stuff to offer, I mean, even we would advise any brand that comes to us that if it's not coming from you, it's never a great idea to have
Exactly.
a challenge being managed by an agency. It never works that way.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think I'm going to come to the last question from our side, and which is I think what discovery of Bharat is. And there is an India, and then there is a Bharat, and you're a premium brand with its roots in ABCD, as you rightly started. But now when it comes to the big opportunity, and everyone's talking of the big opportunity being Bharat, right? Does Epigamia have plans for Bharat, and how do you plan to, if at all you do, and how do you plan to cross that bridge?
So in terms of the larger picture, you're saying
The larger picture, so by Bharat, I mean the tier 2, the tier 3, the smaller
yeah,
towns.
absolutely,
That's where the big
absolutely, yeah.
opportunity.
By the way, you have breached tier 1, tier 2, right? Your brand is there, despite the fact that it is high priced. It is already there. So I think the question twofold: how did you reach the tier 1? And the question, other part which Sangram is probably asking, is how do you reach to the
Yep, absolutely. So you know, very clearly, like you rightfully said, you know, I love when I hear there's that sort of, and you're right, the Bharat, that the tale of two Indias, but I actually think it's the tale of like 8 Indias. I don't think it's a tale of two Indias. I mean, we're already 3 times the size of Europe, right? You know, and I love when I have to sort of tell my investors in France and a lot of my friends back here, I love explaining to them. Frankly, for me, also the last 8 years, one of the other delights that I've had, maybe that's another reason I don't spend time on social media, is any free time I get, I like to discover cuisines within India. I've been to some of the most remote places and had some of the most mind-blowing stuff. The whole concept of South Indian seafood was just alien to me. And when I moved to India, and that's just something that has blown up in my opinion. Chetinath cuisine is something that I think is just outstanding. But without going in, I can talk about it for hours, so I won't go in there. But when I look at the reason I'm saying this, when I explain this to some of those folks, I tell them, when you look at Indian cuisine and you just forget even comparing North Indian to South Indian, that's too broad. I'm saying even if you just compare sort of Maharashtrian, and when I say Maharashtrian, I mean forget coastal. If you go inroads a little bit more, towards between Pune and Baramati, that area, that cuisine, to let's say the cuisine you would get in Kerala, you're talking about the difference between a British Irish cuisine and Greek cuisine, and that's a massive difference, right? And you need to sort of look at that the economy and the differences between that. And that being said, when you look at the population, we're very clear. For us, we're not looking at 1.4 billion people, at least not now, at least not for the, and when I say not looking at it from a consumer perspective, from a target market perspective, purely from a targeting mechanics. From a company perspective, of course, I mean, we want to contribute to the economy, and we want to make it, we're very excited about being able to get more and more manufacturing facilities all over the country and things of that nature. But for us, the target audience is 80 to 100 million people, at scale, and we still have, some time to go 4 or 5 years from now. So 8 to 10, less than 8% of the overall sort of population of the country. That being said, Alok, to your point, right now, our audience base is still only 2 to 3 million people. While we built a bit of a business, we still have a very, very long way to go. 50x just in terms of the consumer base that exists. And for us, we have identified, to answer your question, Sangram, on Bharat's side. So we've identified exactly, and this is an exact calculation, 98 cities where we want to go extremely deep into these 98 cities in the next 3 to 5 years. Today, our penetration of cities is only 30. That's for 30 cities that we're actually, and when I say penetration, I mean we're actually present in. That means that, even if a city has like 5 stores where there's product on the shelf, we count that as a city. But in terms of actual rigor in these cities, it's only about 6 or 7 cities. So, there's still 24 cities we haven't even done rigor in yet. And there's another 60 cities to go. And that's the way we sort of look at it. Now, in terms of strategy, we hate the high price point term, Alok. So again, being candid, I think the way we look at it is it's value deconstruction. And the way I see it is, there's a good question that Gaurav Suri just asked, and I was planning on answering this in this. So the way we see it is when you actually, and this is my thesis on the Indian consumer, we are extremely value conscious consumers, and I hate the word cheap. I think the idea is value conscious. I think the price consciousness comes more from commoditized thinking, but when it comes from product thinking, there's extreme value that people have to pay attention to. So one of the reasons we've been able to sort of succeed, even in, so for example, I remember when the first distributor I met in Bombay told me, I don't see this going to more than 50, 75 stores. We today are in close to 2,500 stores just in Mumbai. And just to give you a sense of, how deep we've reached, and by the way, that's still nothing. The target in Mumbai is 10,000 stores. So we have a long way to go, even in Mumbai. But the idea was when we had people, when we start, sort of speaking about the deconstruction of this product. So what I mean by that is the Indian mindset automatically thinks, I make dahi at home. I can just buy strawberries or mango. I can mash it up. Mixi mein dal ke thoda mix karke. I can mix it up and I can make my own yogurt. Why do I need to buy this, 40 rupee product from Epigamia? But when you actually go about to doing that, and we've actually done some social media campaigns around this, when you actually take dahi and you strain it. So now you need 3 packets of dahi to make 1 cup because you have to strain the dahi, right? Remove the pani that's there. Then you have to get mangoes and strawberries, and you have to get good quality mangoes and strawberries. Then you have to chop it up. And when you actually put it together and you put it in that same cup we give you, we realize that, wow, I just ended up spending 75, 80 bucks on what Epigamia is giving to me for 40, 45. There's value right in itself, and that's where, and I give this advice to a lot of new entrepreneurs that are coming out. Think about when you deconstruct your product, don't think about it in terms of the premium pricing. Think about of course, what the product market fit, there has to be a fit for it. Don't just come up with some crazy sexy product that won't have a fit. But then think about how a consumer can think about deconstructing it, and how it would, and then are you giving them value? So that's how we look at our narrative in terms of the value consciousness of the product. It's not just the narrative, it's the reality, actually. It's not the narrative, it's the reality. Now, the next question is, how do we get people to now shell out 40 rupees just to even experience it? So one of the metrics that we have, sort of thrived on, and our success rate has been extremely high, and I would probably, be happy to boast and brag about this one, is probably one of the highest in the industry, is our repeat rates. And where we've seen a lot of success, and you may have experienced it when you've gone to the shop, and people on the call, we do a lot of sampling. When you go to a store, we'll make you taste it, and then we'll sort of take it from there. And our conversions have been extremely high. So what we want to do now as a next phase of growth is get more and more people to try the brand. Now, it becomes very difficult when we go to 90 cities to have people sitting at every shop, in 1 lakh stores, and taste and sample. It's A, impossible to manage, and B, very costly. So the next phase for us is to launch some smaller packs or introductory packs, which are in a much smaller price point range. And the price point range is not about price. It's more so about getting them to sample and try, because we're very confident that they will convert then, to sort of the 40 rupee price point. And that's the strategy for the next 2 to 3 years. The strategy will be implemented by the third quarter of this fiscal year. And that's the next level of scale that we're going to be having, that we're looking forward to. And that's something we're looking at doing.
Brilliant answer. Brilliant answer. Yeah. I mean, it's almost like a mini marketing class here. I think right from working for six months in an ice cream parlor as replicating research and doing your own research.
Yes.
To this entire strategy of sampling and getting customers to actually understand the perception of value, or understand the whole concept of value. But I think, as you rightly noticed, I would like to move to audience questions. And I think it comes from, again, a very close friend of mine who's there in the audience, which is Gaurav Suri. I worked with Gaurav. Gaurav's from UTI. He heads marketing in UTI. And Gaurav was asking, food preferences change every 10 kilometers in India. How do you find the LCM, or do you look for an HCF from an oral gratification and production perspective to get standardization? Are products standardized for 98 cities or customized for taste differences?
So it's a great question. And early on, we actually did a lot of customization. So I can be, we have a flavor that we launched that was honey banana. It's very close to my heart as one of my favorite flavors. I still think it was one of the best flavors we launched out there. In Chennai, in the larger Chennai area, it was contributing to about 15% of our overall SKU mix, our sales. In rest of the country, it didn't even cross the 2 or 3% mark. To give you some context, right, around that flavor. Mango itself in the north, the contribution is much higher than it is in the west and the south. And I think there are these nuances, and early on, it used to be part of our strategy. As we scale, again, to be very candid and honest, it becomes very tough. And this is sort of addressing the question. It becomes a little challenging to address this, to sort of standardize and I think over standardize. So I think there has to be a healthy balance around how we manage it. I think the way we've approached it is we want to continue to sort of be very close. There you go. Someone just mentioned about the honey banana. So I think as you get close to production, and we are not a production company, we're an R&D company, or we're an innovation company. We're a product company. It's core to our heart. As we get closer and closer, and we take elements of scaled production, minimum production runs, the sourcing, all the boring stuff. The way we look at it now is there's this healthy balance of both, where we don't want to go into a one-size-fits-all product for the country, because I don't think that's where we win on the consumer side. Yes, there are going to be a few SKUs like strawberry and mango that will cut across. But when we look at the saliency of the others, we have to sort of keep that in mind. At the same time, we can't just be over customizing every 10 kilometers, because then you lose out on profitability in the business side of it. So the way we've looked at it is and this is the sort of the easy, it's an easy answer, but that's really what we do, is just keep experimenting, keep trying. And then if you get a flavor that gives you a little bit more saliency in a certain part of the country, as long as we're able to meet our minimum production runs and make it scalable, it's fine. Let's run with it. I'm very happy if Delhi doesn't want to order honey banana, but South India is giving us great orders, we'll run with it.
You have an endorsement right over there.
I saw that. I saw that. So yeah, but I mean, it's not going to be sort of the dominant strategy, but I think it'll be a balance between the two for us. And I think it's very important if we want to win the consumer. We have to. We absolutely have to. Yeah.
So there's a question coming from a close friend, Tushari Gugal. She's a long distance runner with me. She's much better than me, so I must clarify. And she says, what made Epigamia get into plant-based products? So, milk yogurt. Then you have almond milk. And your latest, you remember your latest ad, it talks about desi ghee. And so that's a different part, desi ghee and chocolate.
Yeah.
And now, why and
absolutely.
And where do you go with this?
So if you look at our, as I sort of mentioned this earlier, the brand thesis, we are our sort of mission is to contemporize traditional dairy, right? That's who we are. So like I said, Srikhand became Greek yogurt, and Punjabi lassi fused with strawberries became Greek yogurt smoothie. For us, the whole dairy plethora is on the table, and the idea is to disrupt it and contemporize it. And now there's different ways of contemporizing it. It could be done vis-a-vis the product. It could be done vis-a-vis the occasion. And these are sort of the two primary different ways. For us to, ghee is an area that I've been watching for a very long time. And I think, if you look at it, it's a product that has zero innovation since probably since it was born, right? And we still, and we learned that a lot of our sort of millennial and Gen Z consumer base, looked at ghee as, okay, now of course there's the healthy element in between. Everyone was like, on this whole cholesterol mission that was bad for you, but now again it's sort of full circular. It's good for you again, the good fats, but there's no excitement around it. Like, you never hear someone saying, I'm going home to have some ghee, right? And we said, why don't we have that? It's such an amazing product. And by the way, Deepika is one who actually drove this. She loves it. She believes in Ayurveda in terms of her food habits, and she thinks, ghee has a great balancing effect on your body. And without going into the science, the right or the wrongs, how do we sort of encourage two things? One is, how do we innovate ghee from a product perspective? And B, how do we bring in unique occasions around ghee? And by the way, the idea to do something even further bizarre of the chocolate was intentional. We want to do something crazy that people talk about. But the next feature, the next phase of products that we're going to be launching, which will be very soon, are going to be savory ghee spreads, which will be more traditional ghee. So they're going to be turmeric ghee and garlic and herb ghee and Himalayan sea salt ghee, which can be applied on your paratha or roti or whatever it is. And the idea was the occasion. It doesn't have to be something that's always in the kitchen. You can actually bring it in the front and spread it on something because it has the powerful sort of potential as a product independently, and it can become something sort of interesting and exciting rather than something that's sitting in the kitchen. And that was sort of the narrative around it. And very similarly for plant-based, I mean, the idea is, look, so I'll caveat one thing. I get this question. I'll preempt the question we may get. We don't have a position in this plant-based movement in the sense that we are not activists of the veganism movement and things like that. We embrace it. We believe in it. We're advocates of it, but we're not activists. We believe diet and nutrition is personalized, and our job is to modern and contemporize dairy and give you a whole plethora of products. And you decide what you want to do with it. You decide how you want to take it and how you want to consume it. Now, if we are supposed to be the folks with the flag contemporizing dairy, how do we not be the ones to introduce the plant-based products? Because on a global level, the contemporary take on dairy is plant-based, and there's a massive movement. That's one. Secondly, our consumer base has been demanding this from us for a very long time. I told you, for us, consumer is religion. And what's been very interesting, so we've had a lot of consumers, early adopters of our Greek yogurt, who have actually left the category. And these are direct conversations we have with them because they've gone plant-based or they've gone vegan. And now that we have this digital channel, we said, why not? Let's launch it. We'll get it going. So we launched the channel and we launched this sort of product. What became very interesting is we noticed that only about 10 to 20% of our consumers of plant-based products are actually activist vegan consumers. The rest of the 80 are these balanced diet folks that are saying, look, I like dairy, but I think I'm eating too much of it. So I want to balance it out, so I want to have some Epigamia vegan. I want to have some Epigamia regular. In my smoothie, I want to put some almond milk, and then I want to have a lassi on the weekend. and I'm, to me, that's the most exciting. I think that consumer is the one that is going to be the consumer of the future for these products in India. I think we're just too rooted in dairy to sort of become, sort of completely shift the gear. And it's funny because we get caught in the middle and we get slammed by both activist side. The plant-based activists just slam us and we say, no, wait a second, we're with you. We have vegan products. And then the other side, thinks that we only sell vegan products, and then that they sell fake milk. Amol just took out an ad on this. It was interesting, and we're like, no, we're the peace treaty guys, right? We're the Epigamia.
Epigamia, that's your name.
We're in between.
Lovely. What I loved about today, Alok, is how easygoing this conversation, and I think part of it comes from I guess Rohan's decision to completely make this unscripted, right?
Yeah.
Because we've never had so many questions and so many comments from the audience, and the last one that I see is, to ghee or not to ghee? That's not even a question.
I love that.
Yeah. So fantastic, and we didn't even realize that it's 8:05.
Yeah. I actually have to rush on another call. Sorry as well. So
yeah. No.
Yeah,
mindful of our time, and we usually come in to kind of end at 8:05. But what a fantastic conversation! We didn't even need to be. For the first time, I don't think any of us even remember to say, okay, we've got 5 minutes to go. I just looked at the clock right now and it's 8:05. It was a wonderful session with you, Rohan. I think it was a mini masterclass. Gaurav also said that he started his career with foods, and part of the question that he was dealing with then got answered today.
Okay, excellent.
So Rohan, we can definitely say this is all about what they don't teach you even at the best business school. So you were fantastic today. That's all we can say.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
And to our viewers, thank you very much for giving the hour on this Friday evening. And I'm sure this session must have been equally inspiring for all of you. So that's it from our side on Guts, Glory and Story. Sangram, next week we have another great guy. And go ahead, Sangram, your dear friend.
Yeah, so next week, I think we're taking a break from entrepreneurs and we're moving to the whole artist domain. And we have a photographer who's one of the only photographers in India who's won the World Press and the BBC Wildlife Photographer Award together. I think this year again is the BBC. And a very, very humble guy, humble roots, whose passion and life revolves only around photography. So a brilliant example of what passion does and how we won the BBC for the first time is what the story is going to be all about. So yet another session of guts, absolute guts, glory. And that's session 6 for you with Nayan Khanolkar, Friday, same time at 7 p.m.
Well, we must let the viewers know that his single picture of a leopard walking through the Warli tribe, denotified or notified, what, 200 or 2,000 acres of land?
200 acres.
200 acres of
the
land.
Story that sometimes, I mean, I often ask these photographers, what is it that motivates you guys, spending so many hours? And all of them basically say that sometimes a picture can actually trigger a change. And that's actually what happened, because his picture of the leopard in Mumbai, and he shot a picture of the leopard in Bodhi National Park, which is a story of conservation and coexistence. And that picture was actually noticed by the chief minister. And and he said, where was this shot? And it was shot in an area that was not notified as a wildlife sanctuary. And he said, why is it not a wildlife sanctuary if you've got wild leopards here? And that's how a section of RA got notified as and indeed a picture actually triggered a change. So more about that next week, 7 o'clock, yet another session of Guts, Glory and Story. Thank you for being with us, and you have a wonderful weekend. All the lovely folks for being here. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sangram. Thank you, Alok. Pleasure to be here. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.